The Velthari Dominion had rules, strict ones, old ones, rules carved into stone tablets so ancient that even the stone had grown tired of holding them. Rules about who could speak to royalty, who could look at royalty, who could breathe in the general direction of royalty. The Velthari had been the dominant species of the outer spiral for 6,000 years, and they had spent roughly 5,999 of those years making absolutely sure everyone knew it. And yet, here was Princess Sorvain, third heir to the Dominion throne, 8 years old by Velthari reckoning, which put her somewhere around 11 in human years, give or take a few months and an existential crisis, sitting cross-legged on the floor of her private quarters, completely ignoring a collection of toys that had been imported from 47 star systems, a gravity spinner from the Helosi rings, a singing crystal orb from Mauteth that could replicate any sound in the known galaxy, a miniature fleet of ships, each one a perfect replica of an actual Dominion warship, with working light drives and tiny cannons that fired harmless bursts of ionized plasma. She was ignoring all of them. She was watching the human maintenance crew through the long observation window that overlooked the eastern courtyard. Sorvain pressed her nose flat against the glass, a habit her governess, the rigid and perpetually exhausted Madame Kalova, had been trying to break for 3 years, and watched with her 4 silver eyes completely unblinking. Down below, 4 humans in gray jumpsuits were repairing a section of the courtyard's drainage system. They had been at it since early morning. They were laughing about something. One of them, a short woman with dark braided hair, had just said something that made the tallest one double over and grab his knees. The other 2 were shaking their heads and grinning. Sorvain had no idea what they were saying. She did not care. She watched them the way a scientist watches something they cannot fully explain, which is to say, with total focus and a growing suspicion that everything they previously believed might be slightly wrong. "They are doing it again," she announced. Her attendant, a young Velthari named Praxi, looked up from her console with the weary patience of someone who had been having this exact conversation for 6 weeks. "Doing what, Your Highness?" "The laughing thing." Praxi set down her console. "The maintenance crew is laughing, not just laughing. The way they laugh, it is different each time. The tall one does it differently from the small one, and the one with the red marks on her face does it differently from both of them." Sorvain turned around, her silver gaze sharp and curious in the way only children can be when they have found something the adults around them have missed. "Ours is always the same pitch. Theirs is different every single time. Why is theirs different every time?" Praxi opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I am not certain, Your Highness. I want to know. I will add it to the inquiry list." The inquiry list, it should be noted, now had 217 questions about humans on it. It had started 6 weeks ago, when the new human maintenance contract had brought 14 workers into the palace grounds as part of the Emperor's modernization initiative. Most of the court had barely noticed them. They were staff, background elements, the living furniture of the palace's operational machinery. Sorvain had noticed them on the first day. By the end of the first week, she had already asked more questions about humans than the entire Dominion Intelligence Bureau had bothered to ask in the past decade, which tells you something, either about the princess or about the Intelligence Bureau, or possibly about both. The tall one's name, she had since learned, was Tobias Wren. The short woman with the braids was Ines Carvalho. The one with the red marks, freckles apparently, which were not marks at all but a natural skin variation she had incorrectly assumed were ceremonial, was called Dara Mktunu, and the fourth, who was quiet and moved very efficiently and always finished the others' tasks when they were distracted, was a man named Emre Yilmaz. Sorvain had gotten these names from the staff registry, which she had accessed via Praxi's console without asking permission, because she was 8 and a princess, and the concept of not accessing something had not yet fully registered in her operating philosophy. She said the names out loud sometimes, in her room, practicing the sounds. Tobias, Ines, Dara, Emre. They felt interesting in her mouth. All the syllables landed differently, like music written for an instrument you had never heard before. The problem, and there was a problem, in the way that all truly interesting things eventually create problems, was that Sorvain wanted to talk to them. Not observe from a window, not review their personnel files. Talk to them directly. This was, by approximately every law and custom the Velthari Dominion had ever produced, completely unacceptable. She brought it up at dinner, which showed either tremendous courage or a fundamental misreading of the room. Her father, Emperor Valdren IV, was a large, silver-furred being with the kind of calm authority that took centuries to cultivate and could silence a room simply by setting down a fork. Her mother, Empress Sorin, was somehow more intimidating than that, despite being half his size. Her older siblings, Varric and Thessali, were 12 and 15, and had already mastered the art of not saying things that would cause problems. Sorvain had not mastered this art. "I would like to invite the human maintenance workers to tea," she said, between the second and third courses, in the tone of voice she used when she believed something was obviously reasonable and was simply waiting for everyone else to catch up. The silence that followed was the kind you could weigh. Her father looked at her. Her mother looked at her father. Varric and Thessali looked at their plates with the focused attention of people who wanted to be absolutely invisible. "You would like to what?" said Empress Sorin, and it was not a question. "Invite them to tea, in the sunroom. I have already checked the schedule. They have a rest period between the 14th and 15th hour, and the sunroom is available. I would like to speak with them. They laugh differently each time, and I want to know why." "You want to have tea," Valdren said slowly, "with the maintenance crew." "With the human maintenance crew, yes. The Velthari groundskeepers do not interest me as much. No offense to the groundskeepers. Sorvain?" Her mother's voice had dropped to the particular frequency it used when it was being controlled. "You are aware that we do not socialize with—" "Why not?" "Because they are— staff is what you were going to say. But Madame Kalova has tea with her assistant every morning, and I have never heard anyone object to that." "That is entirely different. Because Madame Kalova's assistant is Velthari." Another silence, heavier this time. Her father looked at her with an expression she had learned to read over the years. It was not anger. It was something more complicated than anger. The look of someone who was confronting a question they had not expected and were not entirely sure how to answer without also questioning something about themselves. "We will discuss this later," he said, which meant no, but in a voice that was not quite committed to no. Sorvain stored that like a weapon. She found Tobias Wren the next morning near the Eastern Service corridor, recalibrating a pressure valve that had been misaligned for 6 months. She had specifically checked the maintenance schedule to ensure he would be alone. She had also told Praxi she was visiting the library, which was in the opposite direction, so she felt fairly confident she had several minutes before anyone realized what she was doing. She walked up to him and said, in perfectly practiced standard, "Excuse me, you are Tobias Wren." He turned around. He was tall, taller than her father, which was unusual, though not in the way her father was tall. Her father's height was architectural. Tobias was tall the way trees were tall, which is to say naturally and without any apparent awareness of it. He had brown hair, light brown skin, and an expression of absolute startled surprise that, after a moment, rearranged itself into something careful and respectful. "Your Highness," he said, and moved to bow. "You do not have to do that." He stopped mid-bow, which left him at an awkward angle. "I? All right. I have been observing your crew for 6 weeks, Sorvain said, with the directness that only children and scientists ever fully commit to. You laugh differently every time. Not just you, all 4 of you. The pitch changes, the duration changes, sometimes the sound changes entirely. I want to know why." Tobias stared at her. Then something shifted in his face. Not quite a smile, but the shape that a smile comes from. That's a very specific question. I have 218 others. But that one seems like a good place to start. He was quiet for a moment, turning that over. "Different things are funny in different ways," he said, slowly, feeling for the words like someone testing ice. If something surprises you, it's a short laugh. If something builds up, a slow joke, it takes longer to land, so the laugh comes out bigger. And sometimes, he paused, sometimes it's not even funny exactly. Sometimes you laugh because the alternative is crying, and laughing feels better. Sorvain was very still. You laugh instead of crying. Sometimes. Why would you choose that? Because. He thought about it for a real moment. Not the polite moment people use when they want to seem thoughtful, but an actual pause of genuine consideration. Because crying acknowledges the weight of the thing, and sometimes you don't want to give it that much weight, so you laugh at it instead. Make it smaller. Sorvain filed that away in a place she would not lose it. That is interesting, she said, and she meant it the way she meant nothing else she said at court, completely, without performance. I would like to continue this conversation. I'd like that too, Your Highness. My name is Sorvain. I know. Good. What time do you finish work tomorrow? He blinked. 15th hour, usually. The sunroom is available then. She straightened, and for just a moment the child dropped away and something older looked through her silver eyes, not coldly, but with absolute certainty. Come for tea. Bring Ines, Dara, and Emre. I will handle the rest. She walked away before he could answer, which was very effective because it left him no room to say no. He would come. She knew he would come. Not because she was royalty, but because she had looked at him the way you look at someone you genuinely want to hear from, and humans, she was beginning to understand, were exquisitely sensitive to that. What she had not yet worked out was what was going to happen when her father found out. That part she was still working on. The sunroom was called the sunroom because it faced the 3 brightest windows in the entire eastern wing. And on clear days, the light came in at an angle that turned everything amber and gold. It was Sorvain's favorite room in the palace for exactly this reason. Everything looked warmer in the sunroom. Even the cold stone walls, even the formal furniture, even Madame Kilova's expression, though that last one was a stretch. Praxi had laid out the tea service without asking questions, which meant she either trusted Sorvain's judgment or had already resigned herself to the consequences. And at this point, those two things were functionally the same. There were 5 cups on the table. Sorvain had specified 5. Praxi had set 5. Nobody had commented on it yet, because nobody had yet looked closely enough to notice that the cups were not arranged in the traditional Velthari formation. Host elevated, guests descending by rank, but in a circle, equal spacing, no hierarchy in the geometry. Sorvain had done that deliberately. She was sitting in her chair, entirely composed, when the 4 humans arrived at the door of the sunroom at the 15th hour exactly. Tobias was in front. They had changed out of their work jumpsuits. They were wearing cleaner clothes, not formal, not court-ready, but clean and considered, the kind of effort that says I understood this mattered without pretending to be something I am not. You came, she said. Sorvain smiled. It was a real one. Sit anywhere. They sat. Emre reached for his cup with both hands, then stopped, glancing at Tobias. Both hands is polite in Velthari custom, Sorvain told him. You can keep doing that. Emre blinked. You noticed that? I notice everything. She poured her own tea and held the cup in the Velthari manner, 3 fingers spread, which she had been doing since she was 4 years old and had never once questioned until this moment, when she found herself wondering if humans had their own cup-holding customs and what they meant. I have 218 questions. We will not get through all of them today. How many do we get through today? Dara asked. Her voice had a particular quality to it. Low, unhurried, the kind of voice that expected to be heard and so never raised itself unnecessarily. As many as feels right? Sorvain settled back. But first, I want to know something outside the list. Something I thought of this morning. 4 humans watched her with the specific attention of people who had just realized this was not a curiosity visit by a bored child. This was something else. They were not entirely sure what yet, but they were paying attention the way you pay attention when the ground under a conversation shifts. My father believes, Sorvain said carefully, that humans are here to maintain things. Fix what breaks, keep the systems running. He believes this kindly. It is not contempt exactly. More like, she searched for the word assumption. The assumption that you are the shape of the role you fill. Silence around the table. My question, she continued, is whether you find that offensive. Tobias set down his cup. He looked at the others briefly, not for permission, but the way people look at each other when they are checking that they are all in the same room for the same thing. Honestly, he said, I would not have asked otherwise. It depends on the day, he said. Some days it doesn't touch you. You're focused on the work, and the work is real regardless of who sees it. Other days, he paused, it sits differently. It makes you feel like furniture, Ines said flatly, without anger. Just accuracy. Yes, Sorvain said. That is the word I was looking for. Furniture. She looked at the cup in her hands. I have been thinking about furniture all morning. About how furniture does not have an inquiry list. About how furniture does not laugh differently every time. She looked up. I would like to understand why my father's court sees you this way. Because I do not see you this way, and I am trying to understand if the difference is age, if I will eventually see you this way too, or if the difference is something else. Dara made a sound. Not quite a laugh. Something adjacent to it. The sharp exhale that means you have just heard something you did not expect from the direction it came from. That, Dara said, is a question a lot of humans spend their whole lives asking about their own species. You ask it about yourselves all the time. And what answer do you usually find? That it's easier to see furniture than people, Emre said quietly. He had not spoken yet, and when he did, the others gave him the particular silence that groups give to the person who speaks least and therefore most carefully. Not because people are hard to see, because if you see them, you have to think about what you owe them. The sunroom held that for a moment. Outside, through the 3 amber windows, the light was doing its usual thing, turning everything warmer than it actually was. Sorvain was very still. That, she said, is going on the list. It was at this precise moment that the door opened and Empress Soren walked in. To her credit, the Empress did not shout. She also did not close the door behind her, which meant that the 2 household guards in the corridor had a clear sightline into a room containing a princess of the Dominion having tea with 4 humans in a circle, which was going to be interesting when the staff reports went through. The 4 humans stood immediately. Not scrambling, standing, with the practiced readiness of people who had spent their careers reading rooms and responding to shifts in authority. Tobias had his hands clasped at his front. Ines had taken a half step back. Emre was perfectly still. Dara, alone among them, met the Empress's gaze for a fraction of a second before dropping it. Not submission exactly. More like the deliberate choice to reduce a variable. Sorvain did not stand. Mother, she said. Sorvain. The Empress's voice was controlled in the way that pressure is controlled. Held, not absent. Her eyes moved across the table, the 5 cups, the circle, the humans. Leave us. The 4 humans moved toward the door. Sorvain said, without raising her voice, we will continue next week. Tobias turned very briefly at the door. Something in his face, not quite a smile, but the foundation of one. Then they were gone. The Empress looked at her daughter for a long, measured moment. You arranged this. Yes, without permission. I did not believe permission would have been granted. You were correct. Soren moved into the room, her long robes displacing the air with the particular authority of someone who had never once entered a room quietly in her life. She sat, not across from Sorvain, but in the adjacent chair, which was, if you were reading it carefully, not the positioning of an interrogation, but of a conversation. Your father will hear of this, I assumed. He will be displeased. I also assumed that. The Empress looked at her daughter, really looked at her, the way parents sometimes look at their children when the child has just done something that reminds them uncomfortably of themselves. What were you talking about? Furniture, Sorvain said. Her mother blinked. Furniture, and what we owe people when we see them. She held her mother's gaze. The human, Emre, said that it is easier to see people as furniture because if you see them as people, You have to think about what you owe them. I have been sitting with that since he said it, and I think he is right, and I think that is why the court sees them the way it does, and I think," she paused, measuring something internal. "I think you might already know this, and you came in here not entirely to stop me." Empress Soren was silent for what felt like a very long time. "You are 8 years old," she said finally. "Yes, you are going to be an extraordinary problem. I know." Something happened in her mother's face then. Something that was not quite a smile, but was the Velthari equivalent of one. A softening around the secondary eyes. A slight shift in the set of the jaw. "Your grandmother," the Empress said, once invited a Helosi dock worker to sit at the imperial table because he had said something interesting to her about tides. The court did not speak of anything else for a year. Sorvain waited. She did not regret it, her mother said. Then she stood, smoothed her robes, and left the room without saying anything further, which was its own kind of permission. The tea with Tobias, Ines, Dara, and Emry happened the following week. And the week after that, by the 4th week, Praxi had stopped noting it in the household log as an anomaly and started noting it as a standing appointment, which in palace record-keeping was a distinction that carried genuine weight. Emperor Valdrin found out, of course. He found out in the way powerful people often find out about things happening under their own roofs, not from a report or a confrontation, but by walking past an open door and hearing his daughter laughing. Not the Velthari laugh, the other kind. The kind that changed pitch, changed duration, changed shape depending on what had prompted it. The kind that Sorvain had watched through a window for 6 weeks and had spent 218 questions trying to understand. He stopped at the door. Inside, his daughter was doubled over a table, one hand pressed flat against the wood, the other covering her mouth, shaking. Ines was next to her, in tears of a different kind, the kind that came with laughing too hard for too long. Dara was leaning back in her chair with her head tilted at the ceiling, a long, slow sound rolling out of her that had nothing formal about it. Tobias was saying something, still building the story, and Emry, quiet, efficient Emry, was watching all of it with the particular expression of someone who had set a very small, very precise fire and was enjoying the results. Valdrin stood in the doorway for quite some time. He was a 6,000-year empire in a single body. He had received star systems as tribute. He had ended wars with a signature. He had stood in rooms where history bent itself around him like light around a dense object. He had not, in recent memory, heard his daughter laugh like that. It sounded different every time. He stepped back from the door, very quietly, and walked away down the corridor, and the 2 guards who had been shadowing him knew better than to say anything about the expression on his face. 3 days later, without announcement or explanation, he modified the staff scheduling directive. Maintenance crew members assigned to palace grounds were, effective immediately, permitted to use the Eastern Wing's secondary dining facilities during rest periods. They were also allocated an additional hour of rest on the 6th day of each working cycle. The directive cited operational efficiency. Nobody believed it cited operational efficiency. A week after that, Sorvain found a note on her writing desk in her father's handwriting. It said, simply, "I am told there is an inquiry list. I would like to see it." She brought him the list the next morning. 231 questions by then, because she had not stopped adding to it. He sat with it for a long time. She watched him read, the way she had once watched 4 humans through a window. With that total, unperforming focus of someone who suspects they are about to learn something important. When he finished, he set the list on the table between them. He looked at his daughter. She looked at him. "The 67th question," he said. She knew the list well enough not to need to check. "If you already know something is wrong, how long is it permissible to continue doing it before the knowing and the doing become the same thing?" Valdrin was quiet. Outside the palace, in the broad eastern courtyard where drainage pipes ran beneath old stone, the world continued its regular business. Somewhere below, probably, 4 humans were working. Possibly laughing, definitely at different pitches. "I do not have an answer for 67, her father said. "I know," Sorvain told him. "That is why I put it on the list." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he did something she had seen him do exactly twice in her life. He reached out and put his large hand over hers, the Velthari gesture of acknowledgement between equals, which protocol reserved for peers of the same standing. He had used it once with the Helosi ambassador after a treaty that had taken 20 years to negotiate. He was using it now with his 8-year-old daughter and her list of 231 questions about humans. "You are going to change things," he said. Not a warning, not quite a pride either. Something in between, where those two feelings lived together without resolving. "I know," she said again, and somewhere in the eastern courtyard, someone laughed. Short and bright and surprised, the kind that comes when something catches you off guard. And the sound drifted up through the amber windows of the sunroom, and Sorvain tilted her head toward it and smiled.